titled this one, Burdening Kids with Goals. And there is a few things to this: goal setting, giving your kids goals and things to achieve. Can it be a positive, a negative, or is it a burden? And I like to think, just like most answers, it is very much complicated. There's no yes or no about this. It's a pretty complicated idea. But for this episode, I'll be sipping on some water, trying to keep cool while we're setting our goals. At the time of recording, it is a very hot day in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I'm based. But I would love to hear from you guys as well. So let me know in the description below. There's a link to all my socials, a Google form, fill it out. Let me know what you think about the podcast, about this episode, about previous episodes, what you want to see, any tips and tricks you have for me to talk about. I would love to get everybody involved, and it would mean the world to get some responses from you guys. I appreciate those of you who have listened so far or are catching this episode for the very first time. My name is Mingus. I have two kids, 7 and 6 years old, 8 and 7 years old. Sorry, we just had some birthdays. And I am by no means an expert, but I'm doing this just to talk it out. We all have kids and we start to get our ideas about how we should do things. And I would love to get other people's ideas and expand what I know and maybe share some things that I've experienced that might help someone else. Who knows? Burdening kids with goals. So we'll look at the positives and negatives of this. And I think by using the word burdening, I think that can be a little bit of a misconception. Yes, you can burden people with making them set goals or setting goals for them. And I think from the off, I just want to say, I don't think it's fair to have your own goals place them on your kids. Like maybe if you had ambitions to go to a certain school, become a professional athlete, become a lawyer or a doctor, just because you wanted that for yourself and maybe you have or haven't achieved that, I don't think it's fair to put that expectation and that burden onto your kids. We obviously want the best for our families and our little ones, and that's great. But there comes a point where sometimes if you're pushing too hard or pushing unfairly, it is a bit of a burden to carry. And unless you've experienced, you probably don't understand unless you've experienced it, I guess, until maybe you're a bit older. But I'd like to think if people really thought about the way that they have been pushing or they are tending to push their kids into certain areas or fields or directions and having them do certain things by a certain age or whatever it is, I think if we took a step back and looked at it like we were looking at someone else and their kids, it gives us a bit of perspective that maybe we can judge ourselves a bit more fairly rather than saying, I just want what's best for my kids, where it can be a little bit unfair at times. But that's not to say having goals for your kids or helping them set their own goals is a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. There are some very good positives, and I've written a list here that I want to just go through a little bit. We'll touch on a few things. The first one, obviously, goal setting can build motivation. You have something in mind that you want to achieve, and it gives you, a goal to strive for, and an ambition. So it could be something simple like we're going to learn how to play the piano or something by the end of the year. We're going to learn guitar by the time we're 10 years old or something like that. It could be something simple like we're going to set the table together for dinner tonight. And it's something to look forward to. It's something to strive for. And, something simple like the goal of setting the table together or having your child set the table by themselves, something attainable, something they can achieve. It can cause some excitement and bring some positivity and gives them a sense of achievement. Like you don't want to have completely unreachable things. There can be very simple things like, let's do our best to finish our lunch today. It could be we're going to try and color this picture inside the lines. It could be some simple stuff like that. And being able to reach simple goals like that is just small little boosts of confidence. We want to feed confidence into our kids, but without empty compliments. I don't think it's healthy to give empty compliments, if you know what I mean. Like, kind of like telling your kid they're the best at something, or you're so great at this, when there's nothing to back it up. Essentially, you're just filling their heads with full of empty words. And I'm not saying don't tell your kids they're great at something, but I'm saying encourage when they reach a small goal and how good that is for them and how good they've done to achieve that goal. You did so well to have your lunch today. You must have been so full. You did really well to eat all that. Oh, that picture looks amazing. You did so well coloring inside the lines. And, it's those little confidence boosts rather than saying, you're a good kid. You are the best kid ever. I mean, those things are nice too, but if you're constantly telling your kid they're good just for no reason, it's sort of like a fake confidence. It's sort of like an ego boost for them that will never be fulfilled because there's no backing to it. There's no substance to it. But yeah, knowing that they can achieve whatever small goal it is, it fills them with self-belief. And I think that's more important than being able to achieve a goal, is to believe that you can achieve it. Even if you don't get there, you might eventually, but it's being able to stick to something. So if you're teaching your kids how to set their goals, maybe you're teaching them as well planning skills. Maybe breaking down a more complicated thing. All right, let's build this Lego house together. First, we need to build a solid base. And so you got to think about, how big do we want this thing to be? Where's it going to go? And it just gives them, an idea and gets their brain working for planning skills. That kind of stuff is underrated. One of our oldest kid, he loves to fly into whatever he wants to do. He just feels like he wants to make something. He'll just start. Sometimes he'll have no concept of how he's going to start, and that frustrates him. And maybe we could have done a better job helping him learn how to plan things, giving him smaller goals to achieve. But he gets this idea sometimes that, I'm going to make this really complicated object out of toilet paper rolls and sticks and whatever craft things there are around the house, but he doesn't know how to start it. So it's sort of like that planning skills, I think, is something we needed to work on as well. But that is important because without those, he can get frustrated and it can lead to some, hard days where he's having a hard time, coming to terms with not being able to do something because he doesn't know how to start it. But that also at the same time, we're teaching resilience in a way, because if our kids can't or are unable to achieve what they wanted to achieve, they can't reach their goal, we're dealing with failure. And the reality of life is that we're not always going to achieve what we want, and we're always going to have something that we fail at, whether it be big or small. We're constantly dealing with failures, serious or not serious. And if you achieve everything that you aim to in life, I think you're lying to yourself. If you think that's the case, there's always something we can't quite get, and we need to deal with setbacks and that hit to our egos, that reality check, whatever you want to call it, that maybe we're not good enough at this point in time, we need to improve somehow. And that resilience to, okay, we failed, but it's not the end of the world, we can keep going. Those kinds of skills, I think, by goal setting and even failing to achieve those goals, is really something important I think we need to give our kids. On the flip side, there is a point where it can become stressful. So much like, I think I've said this a few times in previous episodes, but younger kids and they don't know how to control or deal with their emotions as well as adults. If you can believe that all adults know how to control and work with their emotions, that's great. I don't think so. A lot of us struggle with dealing with our own emotions, and kids are no different. So there can be some pressures or stress that comes with goal setting, especially if the goals are too lofty, they're too high, they're too ambitious. Like, we're going to get nothing but straight A's in our homework, and we're going to win every game we play, and that kind of stuff can lead to stress and unrealistic goal setting. It's kind of like it will lead to burnout because you're constantly chasing something that is almost impossible to get. It wears you down. And of course, the other thing we need to be wary about is sometimes it's not about achieving whatever goal that is. It might not be, okay, we say learning an instrument. We want our kids to learn how to play the guitar. It's not necessarily that they will know how to play a guitar at an elite level. They won't know how to play. It's not because we want them to learn how to play a certain song or they need to have this skill set. Sometimes it's the journey getting there. So the setbacks, dealing with things that get thrown up, like this extra complicated pattern, or not being able to just nail down this beat, and dealing with setbacks. They could have a cut on their finger. They can't play for a week and they get frustrated. They want to keep going. It's getting used to building that resilience and tackling whatever setbacks that they face is probably more important than being able to achieve whatever final goal it is. I remember high school, even primary school, and sometimes a tricky math problem. And my dad was great at maths, and bless him, sometimes his explaining, whilst logical and calm, just didn't sink in sometimes. And the frustration of learning to overcome whatever I was feeling at that time and be able to hear him is just as important a lesson now that you look back at it than it was to actually figure out what the equation was. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Being able to figure out how to figure it out is just as important as knowing what the math problem meant. Yeah, that kind of makes sense in my head. I hope that makes sense for you guys. I'm not sure. Let me know. Let me know what you think of that. Anyway, the other side of that it's not really the goal that is the goal. Sometimes that can, I've written here, it undermines intrinsic motivation. So rather than enjoying the task or the process of getting there, and the motivation to get there is enjoying the progress, rather than the only motivation to get there is the end goal, or like you'll get a reward if you achieve this goal, your focus can become on the reward rather than what the goal actually means or the lessons you learn to get there. So you could say to your kids, you set the table for the next week and I'll buy you an Xbox. They will become hyper fixated on the Xbox is the prize. That's all they care about, rather than appreciating what they're doing around the house to help, or the little things that go into setting the table that you're trying to teach them to learn. And sometimes, the reward at the end overshadows everything else, and yeah, that's great to achieve a reward. But what is that whole thing of goal setting taught you? That you can get a reward? Or are you trying to teach the kids to set the table, to take responsibility around the house and help out? Again, if the goals are too lofty, or even sometimes if a simple one can't be achieved, it can sort of bring about an anxiety or, risk aversion. Like the kid doesn't want to take a risk in case they fail. Because if they don't achieve their goals, it's the end of the world. And that could potentially lead to, I don't want to try something new because if I fail, well, then I won't get this reward at the end. Or if I fail this goal, I'll let everyone down. And that's a hurdle to overcome. That is definitely something that needs to be overcome. I'm not sure exactly how you can stop that feeling. It might come from reinforcement of how important the journey is rather than the result. And it could be from kids playing a team sport, and although they might lose the championship game, did you want your kids to achieve a medal as the reward, or was the reward teaching them teamwork, discipline, skills, how far they've come in their development, how much faster they can run, how much better they play as a team, and all those sort of things? What are we emphasizing is the goal of playing a sport? I think that's why I think winning for sake of a trophy sometimes takes away from the entire journey and can cause a loss of focus on what is actually important when it comes to winning a trophy or achieving a goal. So you don't want to overshadow the whole process that we go through in working to achieve a goal. I think that is one of the most important things, aside from the goal itself. Maybe even more important than the goal itself is the journey it takes to get there. So I think goal setting is great. I think we should teach our kids responsibility through goals and through a reward system potentially. But I think we need to balance that with being able to understand, even if we fail, we've won. Even if you make a mistake, you've learned something. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I said at the start, please get in touch. I would love to hear from every single one of you guys or girls out there listening to this. It would mean the world for you to get involved somehow. So in the description, all the links, get involved somehow. You can comment on the episode. I would really appreciate it. Let me know if you've made it this far in the video. It would blow my mind. But I want you to know I appreciate you, and I will catch you next week.